Hey guys, welcome to Supernatural Choices. I'm your host, and I'm excited that you guys are going to be with me today. Sorry, I had to take a little bit of time off over the last couple of weeks, but I'm back at it on there again. So I'm really excited that we're going to be taking part in this and looking at supernatural choices. So cool. All right. A few things on there. So I'm really pumped and excited to talk about today about the vampires in actual Twilight. Twilight is it takes me back to a time when I was many years ago when I was watching the actual movies themselves. I never read the books, so in all full disclosure, I did not. But as far as the movies goes, watch the movies, and I was with somebody at the time that had really the same personality as me, and she was very much into the actual Twilight. She liked it more from the interesting part of it, the concept from that standpoint. At the same time, she could laugh at the cheesiness of it. She could laugh at the just the overall setup and the concept of that love story. So she could laugh at it, and at the same time, could respect like the material on there. So um, so it takes me back to those times, is what it does. And I think overall, it's a wonderful story. Don't get caught up in all the kind of, with some of the really hardcore fans. Just, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend to go see it. Chilling out, check it out and see how you like it. And I'm telling you, it'll be a nice experience. It really will be on there. Let me go over and share my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Give me 1 second. It'll pull on up. Let's go to window and bam. All right, there we go. Now we got it nice and set up there. So with Twilight, there's here over with Supernatural Choices, what we do is we talk about these fictional beings and we talk about it in the terms of in our modern world, would it make sense to, if you're given an option to take part and be one of these fictional beings, be it something from movies, TV shows, books, and whatnot on there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's the key piece that we're going to solve. Obviously, I'm your host, Joe. And I'm just super excited to have you guys with me. If you haven't done so, please hit the like, subscribe, and share. I got a Twitter, also Cash App, and also I think I got Patreon also too. So you can take part in it multiple different ways is what you can do. So definitely on there. But let's go over as far as with the overall, get into this part. With Twilight itself, I give you guys a brief overview. I think everybody knows the story. Everybody has their own opinions on the story, but I give you a real brief overview. And there's actually a lot of YouTube channels that are dedicated to Twilight. They go much deep into the lore, the history, the characters. You can always check those things out if you want on there. And there's other online sources. But essentially, with Twilight, you have the main character, Bella, who moves to this town, meets a boy, falls in love with the boy, and discovers that he's a vampire. He's like pretty old. I don't know if he's 100 or something like that. His name's Edward. And they developed this teenage romance love story that evolves around it and Edward's world as his vampires. You eventually meet one of Bella's friends, this guy over here, and turns out like super nice guy in the beginning. He's in the friend zone. He likes being a friend. Then he becomes not a werewolf. Sorry, he actually becomes a shapeshifter. Is what he becomes. A shapeshifter that only goes to a werewolf. And then there's some kind of crazy love triangle that develops around that. And that's really pretty much the story. There's some other stuff. There's occasional fighting. Not that much in the first movie. The second movie had very little fighting also. Not till you get to New Moon where you get a little bit more action orientated to it. But that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. You do meet, as far as with Edward, you meet him and his fellow vampire family members, the Cullens, and they're all vampires, and some of them are very old. They're actually vegan vampires. They don't eat meat they don't drink blood from humans, they drink actually the blood of animals is what they do. So they're a very unique category for them. You also meet later on. You meet the werewolf pack. I shouldn't say werewolf. They're actually shapeshifters. They're a group of shapeshifters, and but they only change shape into wolves, very large wolves. And I figured I talk about like them, their whole story, and whether or not that makes sense in our modern world in a different episode, because there's a lot of stuff to that, is what there is. But they're pretty cool from that standpoint. And you also meet these other vampires who do drink. These guys, they don't. Also, they some drink blood, some don't. But you meet these older vampires that kind of run in things and charging things, and there's all kind of vampire, werewolves, or shapeshifter action and that comes about from that standpoint. When we think about like the overall story as far as what Twilight, one of the things you got to think about is like the legacy, because you may not understand it, but at one time this was a huge hit. This was like groundbreaking. They spent very little to make the movie. It made a ton of money. It made all those guys that were involved with the movie big stars, household names, and they developed an entire cult following. So you think about the legacy of Twilight, there's a lot of cool things that came out of it. You know, the first one was that there was a renewed interest in the young adult novels, and they were treated as far as different types of takes and more information that came from young adult novels. There was a plethora of introduction of all these new young adult novels, which is pretty cool from that standpoint. There was also a renewed interest in urban fantasy. And we think about urban fantasy, you know, supernatural choices is all right there together. I love urban fantasy. I love reading urban fantasy books, movies, TV shows, all that kind of good stuff on there. But there was a renewed interest in this concept of having these supernatural creatures living in our modern time and interacting with the modern environment around us. So there was a lot more stuff that came out of it from that piece. There was also the legacy as far as things that came out. This guy over here, he looked a lot like Brad Pitt. To when I first saw him, I thought he was Brad Pitt, but he's not. He's one of the vampires, and he was actually one of my favorites. I thought he was a pretty interesting character. Then there was also this dude, which was the first vampire that I've seen that was black with dreadlocks, and I thought that was pretty cool. So he got introduced also. And there was the love story, the triangles love story, which it wasn't really this love triangle. It was supposed to be this thing where she had to choose between two guys, but there was never really any choice. So that was a big letdown, is what it was. But people, they've, you know, pontificated on that so much more afterwards about them, their history, what it involves, what it entails. And it was just a huge piece that was from it, as far as that legacy piece. There was also the concept of sparkling, which I'm going to move my screen to give this dude his proper dues. Let me just move this out the way, because having a little boy sparkle, that's one of the legacy things. So it made a safe space for dudes to actually sparkle with glitter and the sparkle with sparkle powers. Obviously, My Hero Academia came much later, and Sparkle World Powers, they came much later on there. But definitely, I can see the correlation between Edward Cullen and his sparkling and My Hero Academia and them creating this character. So that's part of that legacy too. There was also, like I mentioned before, a lot more young adult novels that came out. One was 50 Shades of Grey, and that whole series that came out. They made movies also too. I haven't watched any of that stuff on there. But there was this renewed push for like women's fiction. What are women like? Women reading and talking about these things just purely from their perspective on there. There was also a big piece that came out of this was this choice that you had to make between Edward and Jacob, the vampire and the werewolf. Which one would you prefer? There was all kind of women, and it was like Team Jacob, Team Edward. They made T-shirts. There was a lot of dialogue, a lot of stuff about that. You know, if you're younger, you don't remember those times. It wasn't around then. Just talk to you like your mom, your grandma, your aunts, maybe even your wife, if they're like around like 35 to up to 60, because that was a huge thing, and it was just, you couldn't escape it. As much as you hated it, it was all over the place. It was all in pop culture. There was no escaping it, and it was just out there, man. Final piece that I love was the introduction of a vampire baby. I don't, I cannot remember before that. This movie came out of a vampire baby. I was trying to do some research and I couldn't on there. Nothing other than which came later on was What We Do in the Shadows, which is a hilarious show. I definitely recommend you check it out. Again, it's urban fantasy. It's got vampires in it, and it's just really cool show. So definitely check that out. But the whole introduction of a vampire baby is a pretty cool concept too. So that came out of it also. So I'm crediting, this Twilight for making a vampire baby. So don't hate on me. I'm not making fun of Twilight. I think it's pretty serious. All right, it did a lot of good in the world. But when we think about Twilight, you got to think about their vampires and what they're like, and the whole concept behind them. First of all, there's a sparkling, which they do inside the light time. They're not, they don't burn in the sun. They just glitter is what they do, and as a result, they try to avoid the sun because they want to keep the fact that they're vampires secret. They don't want to let the entire world know about it. They're afraid that can endanger their species, so they do everything they can to avoid the sun, and that's why they were living in, I think it was in Oregon, is where they were living at, and that's where Bella moves because they have a lot of darkness, a lot of rain, a lot of clouds that happen, especially inside the area that they're living in. So you don't have to worry about burning in the sun, but as far as it goes, they do sparkle. Another thing about them is that they have the option of drinking either human blood or they can drink animal blood. Now, the cool thing is that neither one really makes you stronger. So it's not like, hey, you're going to drink this human blood. It's going to give you enhanced powers or abilities. No, it's more about the taste of it. And there's some vampires that choose to go ahead and drink human blood. And there's other vampires that choose not to. They will go ahead and they will drink animal blood. And the type of blood that they prefer is like the big game predators, is what they do. So it's not as good as human blood, doesn't taste as good or smell as good, but they can survive on it. So you don't necessarily have to go out and drink humans, which is really unique on there, really great for them. The other piece is that being a vampire, they are much stronger, according to some of the sources, that they're like, thousands of times stronger than a regular person. So they can pick up a tree, they can stop a car without any problems. They're 100 times faster. They can run up to 100 miles an hour, is what they can do. They get enhanced sight, sounds, smells. They do some physical changes when they become a vampire. And by the way, the way they become a vampire, it's whole thing where you gotta bite. The vampire has to give their blood, and then that's how you become a vampire. There's something in their body that's like the vampire juice. It's like a venom, and it's inside their teeth, it's inside their body. When they put that inside a human, the human will later on become a vampire. It can either take anywhere from 2 to 5 days, depending on how much they get inside them and how close it is to their heart. The transformation process is a burning sensation, is what they describe it as all the cells in your body are changed. All the liquids in your body, they become this vampire juice. That includes inside the eyes. So you no longer have spit, saliva, or any other fluids. It's all just this vampire juice that's inside the body. Interesting enough is that vampire females, they can no longer have a baby. They can't do that anymore. But the men, they can. Their vampire juice can get inside a woman's body, get them impregnated, so they can produce that way and come out with a vampire baby. Also, when you look at that transformation, a big part of it is like their voice. Everything gets enhanced inside the person so that they're much more beautiful than they were inside regular life. Not a lot. I mean, if you have a bad built butch body, it's not going to change it over to you. Now you're this hot supermodel. That's not going to happen. I should say beach blonde, bad built butch body. That's the correct way to say it on there. It's not going to make you into a supermodel. But what it does is like it helps out your skin. Your voice slightly changes, so it's more soothing. That and clears up the eyes. There's no scars or tattoos on your body, so that you're kind of just a more enhanced person. So if you got a beautiful person, they become more beautiful. If you have an average person, they become better looking. When they become a vampire is what happens. So that's a pretty cool things of it. Speaking of skin, like I mentioned before, and I got to refer to my notes because there's a lot of information about the actual vampires. But when I mentioned about the skin, that they actually their skin becomes this almost like this hardening type where it almost feels like marble. It doesn't feel like normal skin. And the other part, like I mentioned before, is that there's a sparkle, is what there is. So they will sparkle in the sun. Doesn't happen in UV light. Supposedly that doesn't affect them. Or I talk about some of the science behind that later. At the same time, they really, with the whole sparkle concept, they can go inside regular lights, but they can't go out inside the sunlight. Specifically, that is what makes them sparkle. So they can't do that, or they get exposed. The eyes, as you can see in some of these, they turn red when they drink human blood. They're supposed to be gold when they don't, when they drink animal blood. But every now and then you'll see like either someone forgot to order contacts or whatever reason on there. You see they got the regular just black eyes is what they have. They don't get too fancy from that standpoint. So maybe they got contacts in is what they have. So trying to blend in. Another concept with them, they're actually at the strongest when they first change, and that's because their body is full of human blood, is what it is, to the point to where it's completely saturated. And then after time, that human blood gets all used up. And even if they try to drink regular human blood, they're not going to be anywhere near as strong. Like I mentioned before, there's not that much difference between the strength of a vampire that drinks human blood, or if it's a vampire that drinks animal blood. There's not that much difference in the strength. Another thing is that they can get special abilities, and what happens is that when you become a vampire, whatever skills or traits you have, they become enhanced. And I give you an example, like if you're a good hunter, then you're gonna be a really good tracker as a vampire. If you're a good singer, you're gonna have incredible singing voice. There's some other abilities they have where Edward, he can actually read thoughts, is what he can do, and that's very unique ability. There's another vampire that can look into the future and can see things in the future. There's others that's super fast. So there's all these different types of abilities that come out when you become enhanced. So whatever abilities you got now, that was what gets enhanced, is what happens. The only way they're really tough and they're really strong, the only way you can really kill them is you got to tear apart their body and you have to burn it, is what you have to do. So that's the only way you can truly kill a vampire. They're impaling it with a stick, garlic, crosses. They don't care anything about that stuff. They're going to be totally fine. It's not going to affect them at all. So you really have to go to town on them, rip them apart, and put them on fire. It's what you have to do. Couple other things about them is that they don't need to breathe. They do breathe though, because they try to appear human. They try to blend in, so they can go underneath water and they're totally fine. They're not going to drown. They're totally fine from that standpoint. They don't really grow any long hair. The hair that they have is what they have on their body. I don't know what happens if they get like burnt and they catch on fire. Are their hair going to come back, or that piece on there? I don't think I didn't see any explanation for that part. But it's not like, hey, you're bald, and now that you become a vampire, you're going to magically grow hair. No, you can stay bald. Is what you're going to do. That's all on you, buddy. From that piece. So last piece I would say is that they don't have any fangs. So why did my camera move like that? Come on. Oh, all right. They don't have any fangs. So that's the other piece about the vampires themselves, is that they do not have any fangs. So they look perfectly normal like a human being, except for the sparkle is the really difference when it comes to the vampires. So there comes to the point to where you think about your life in our, with supernatural choices, your life as a Twilight vampire inside our modern world. So you got to think about, all right, you go down to the kitchen, there's a Twilight vampire there. He's telling you all about these abilities and this is what you're going to be. And you decide like, hey, you're going to go down that route. What would your life look like? The first thing you're going to go through the transformation. It's going to take about 2 to 5 days, depending upon how much vitamin you get and how close it is to your heart. One of the key things about that is that it's very painful. So you're gonna have to find a safe spot to go through that process and go through that transformation. And then bam, you're a vampire. A big hurdle is going to be like you have to really control your bloodlust because you're gonna be just ravaging. You want to just tear up some humans and just drink their blood like crazy. So you have to figure out a way to really calm that piece down. Is what you're going to have to do and really survive that and really get to the point to where you can interact and blend in and function with society. So maybe take a month off. You quit your job, or you take a month off, or you quit school, and you just kind of focus on being the best vampire you can be during that time period. The second thing you got to think about is that the sparkling. So again, if you go around sparkling, there's a chance that people are going to realize like, oh, there's something unusual about this guy, and from a sparkling, he's sparkling all over the place. Found this really interesting fan website, and let me see if I can try to do this so that you can see the actual Reddit post and Reddit page. And I'll probably, if I can remember, I'll try to put a link inside the description that goes over this. But basically, the guy breaks down the science, and he takes his time and really dissecting and analyzing it. And turns out that there is a way that you can prevent yourself from sparkling inside the sun. And one of the things he discovered was like when he was doing his whole like he's a scientist and he understands about light, about physics, all that kind of part on there about the UV spectrum. And he breaks it down to say like what's really causing a sparkle. It's got to be and why would it affect something like UV light? Why would not affect something like a regular light bulb? And he goes into that whole piece on there. But the bottom line is that what he did, what he breaks down, he does much more better than I could. As far as like, if you don't want to sparkle, all you got to do is wear sunscreen. That's it. You put on sunscreen, you can go outside, you're going to be totally fine. Yes, people forget to wear sunscreen all the time. And yeah, it can be kind of smelly. It can be a pain in the ass sometimes, but they got fragrance free stuff, is what they do. All you got to do though, put on some sunscreen and you're totally fine. You can do everything you was doing before. You can go to the beach. You can go to your regular job. You can do all that kind of stuff, and you don't have to worry about sparkling from that standpoint. All right. So your life doesn't really get affected from that piece. So you go through that time period where you got to adjust. Then you start wearing sunscreen, and you're totally fine. That's all you got to do. Just put on sunscreen. And he goes through it on there. And that's pretty cool. The other thing you can just say, if you really became a Twilight vampire, you can just say like, just, fuck it. I'm just going to go around sparkling in the sunlight, and I dare somebody to go say something about it. And there's a pretty good chance you can get away with it. Just looking at our modern times and what's going on in the world, and how there's a level of acceptance from alternative lifestyles that I bet you today you could go inside your job today in full glitter, and no one will say anything. They won't stop you. They may look at you funny, but no one's going to report you or anything like that. And if they did, you can just go ape shit on them, and just say like, hey, I got alternative lifestyle. This is what I choose to do. I can still do my job just like I've always done. Don't oppress me and my choices of glitter is what you can do. So you can just go ape shit. And I bet you it'll work. I bet you it would on there. Just go just straight in like gold dust. Do it. You can do it now. No one's going to stop you. They're going to let you do your thing. It's going to be totally fine on there. So, or you can just put on sunscreen. I would probably opt for sunscreen because that'd be the better choice on there. Then you have, as far as the option of like eating humans or animals, I would recommend that you go ahead and just eat animals. Stay away from eating humans because you got to eat them. There's a whole guilt you're going to feel about eating a person, which is not going to be cool at all. You got to hide the body. You got to make up all these excuses and lies and stuff like that. You don't want to go that route. Or you have to be a nomad where you just travel all over the world eating up people and hoping that you don't get caught. So I wouldn't go that route. It'd be better just go and be a vegan or vegetarian vampire and just go that route. I think that'd be the much easier route to go by in the long run. You can stay where you want. You don't have to move around. You're just going to have to eat some animals is what you're going to have to do. And speaking of which, on there, you're going to have to find some big game. And that is going to be a little bit tough, especially inside the United States, where we got a lot of animals that have been wiped out of extinction. When you talk about big game or big time big game predators, we don't have that many like we used to. Yeah, you got polar bears, and but you got to go up to up to Alaska and up to that northern side to go see those. You got mountain lions and cougars, but depending on which area you're in, they could be really endangered. Same thing with the Florida panthers, they're endangered species on there. So if you start eating those, it's going to be pretty obvious. Hey, you're doing something. Bears are more herbivores, and most of their diet comes from plants. Is where they come from. They're eating berries and fish. I guess they do eat the fish too on there, and they eat some wounded animals, but they eat everything, including trash. So it's probably not going to be as tasty. Reading online about from the standpoint that deer, herbivores, they don't taste as good as carnivores. So trying to find a big game carnivore is going to be pretty tough. You may either go on safari someplace and go look and start eating up some lions, tigers or something like that where they're plentiful. You can also do the whole thing where maybe go down to South America. There's some places you can go in there. So there's different places you can go to. And I was thinking also like going to Florida, especially like the Everglades, where you got all those like the Burmese python that's like all over the place and just tearing up the native species. You got the alligators that are just all over the place. They're tearing up and just causing all kind of damage on there. So you can really go through and just try to focus on those animals. You go on your hunts once a month or so, I imagine, and just go tear up those animals, and you'll be totally fine. It'll be all good on there, and you don't have to eat people. So I highly recommend don't eat humans. Then there's as far as like your job, and like I mentioned before, you got to work. It's not like again in a modern world you need money to live. So you could just keep your job that you have now, even if your job's crappy. Just go and keep working at it. If you love it, that's great. If you don't, then you can quit or you can get a different job. But you don't have to really go through and get a brand new job from that standpoint. You can keep working wherever you're working at now. I guess after maybe 20 or 40 years, or probably 20 years for most people, you'd have to either leave jobs, change jobs, or you'd have to go underground because if they got somebody on the payroll that's 80, but they look like they're 25, that's gonna be kind of obvious. Maybe got to make a fake ID or fake identity, which is getting more difficult now that with computers and the different types of ID that's required and the way that they have different ways of checking the background of folks. So you may need to you may have to figure out a different process from that standpoint when it comes to work. But eventually, maybe be a day laborer or something like that. And we'll talk about jobs in a minute. But you don't necessarily have to go out and quit your job right away, which is really convenient, from that piece. The final piece is like you can make more vampires. So if you have a spouse and you say, hey, I want to make that person into a vampire, you can do that. If you got kids, you can make them the vampire. So hopefully you wait until the kids are much above age and you give them an option. Hey, do you want to be a vampire or not? Don't just go around making vampire babies. Don't go that route. We don't need any vampire babies. The other piece is super important is that you choose the right people. Don't just get a bunch of random assholes like the guys that we have over at What We Do in the Shadows. Again, I cannot recommend that show enough. It's a great show. But don't just get a bunch of random assholes who are going to make vampire babies. You don't want that to happen on there. You want to choose the right people that's going to be really sensible about it when it comes to making new vampires. So overall, I mean, I don't think that there's that big of a distraction as far as becoming a vampire inside our modern world. The biggest thing is just going to be as far as first thing is getting over the thirst. That's going to be probably a big hurdle to get over. Remembering to put on your sunscreen every day. And depending on where you live, I know some people forget all the time when they're going outside to the beach. So that's going to be a new habit you have to form. And then eventually the third thing is just kind of figure out from a job standpoint of how do you manage that piece on there. So overall, it's not that big of a really hard inconvenience as far as being a vampire, a Twilight vampire. And speaking of jobs, I was thinking about, okay, you go and you do you become a Twilight vampire. Like, how are you going to make money? Yeah, you can still keep your same job, but that's not fun. You want to do something that's going to be interesting, that's going to be able to utilize your abilities, and that's going to really stimulate your mind from that standpoint. So I was thinking of some cool jobs, and I was thinking first as far as there's always the professional athlete, but again, you're going to have to eventually you have to quit, or you got to make it a very convenient escape. Yeah, because you got the strength, you got the speed, you got hand senses, you can play any sport and you completely dominate like crazy is what happened. But eventually, you're going to have to retire because it's just going to be kind of obvious someone's 80 years old looking 25 or something like that. So you're gonna have to retire, and then you're gonna have to figure out a way to drop out of the limelight and just not be seen in the public. Because again, that would be kind of obvious. Like, hey man, this guy still look the same. Don't want to do that. Some people can get away with that. Black don't crack. But other people, you're gonna have to be real careful about that piece. So maybe not professional athlete. There's a lot of other ways you can make money on there. So again, I gotta look at my notes because there was quite a bit of cool stuff about it. One thing I was thinking about was like an art thief, and where you would just go through and steal paintings, statues. That'd be pretty stimulating. Use your speed, your enhanced senses in order to do that. You sell the art. You unfortunately have to sell it to someone that would buy stolen art. Usually that's going to be like some typically scumbags or people don't know that is stolen. So you're gonna have to do that part, but you can make money that way, and you can make quite a bit of money from that as far as with stealing art pieces. It is illegal, so maybe you shouldn't go that route, but that's a way you can get by if you ever needed to. Then what I really thought was cool was high stakes poker. Like they have the World Series of poker matches every year. That thing's like $40 million is what it is. So if you get ability like Edwards, we can read minds. That'd be amazing to go in there. You win your $40 million. You spend some money to set yourself up. You invest the rest, and just let the money come in. And boom, you're done working. You don't have to worry about that piece at all anymore. You can just move forward. You got nothing to worry about there. So poker is definitely an ability that'd be really cool that you can utilize in order to make money. I thought about also treasure hunting, like going to the bottom of the ocean and looking for as far as buried treasures at the bottom of the ocean. You don't have to breathe anymore. Probably don't have to worry about the pressure of the deep sea. You're fine. You can swim. You're super strong. But going to the bottom of the ocean, I think it'd be pretty cool. And you can make a lot of money that with buried treasure. You can spend as much time as you want down there. Don't have to worry about scuba gear or anything of that sort. You use your senses, your smell, your sight, your taste in order to find it, bring it up, and then bam, you just made tons and tons of money. Thought about also like a stunt performer or extreme sports. Although, you can make money in that way, but then you're going to have to eventually figure out a way to drop out of limelight. So again, that whole being famous, it can be a burden. It's what it can be. So you kind of want to keep a lower profile than that. Thought about being a detective, which is interesting, but I don't know. It just most people may be a detective right now, so I don't think that'd be one. But what I did think was interesting was being a corporate spy. And I don't know my camera; it just keeps on moving on me. Stop moving. A corporate spy. So imagine for a second that what you're doing is that you're taking corporate information and you're finding out what what's going on from a financial standpoint, find out what they're investing in, how those things are going. You take that information and you use that to make investments, or you sell that information to the competition, and you can make a ton of money. That call yourself a consulting firm, and have some dummy that's going to be there in the front office working for you, being the cover guy. But at the same time, you can just make a ton of dough doing corporate spying. I was also thinking about a race car driver, which with the enhanced senses, and that'd be great. You can do that really well, but then you're going to be famous, and you have to drop out of limelight somehow and just be unrecognizable is what you'd have to do, which would be difficult, especially if you get a lot of fans. Then I thought about a bounty hunter. You can make some money that way, but if as far as finding bad guys, and maybe that's an honorable thing to do, that to use your abilities to help people and find bad guys, find lost kids. That'd be really cool, and that can be lucrative at the same time, especially if you're really good at it. But you'll have to eventually figure out a way to drop out of it and not be seen again. So maybe it's one of those things where you do some of these jobs, then you go away, come back 100 years and do some more jobs, and then you go away and you come back 100 years and do some more. Last thing I was thinking about was like an esports gamer, getting those quick reflexes that can really come into play and can be really useful when it comes to esports. I was thinking of the worst things to do would be work inside the hospital, inside being an administrator, a doctor, or nurse. You're gonna be around blood all day, and you're just gonna be really tempted to go start drinking that blood and taking advantage of that blood. So I do not recommend that if you were a Twilight vampire to go inside that role. Overall, just looking at supernatural choices and whether or not it makes sense in our modern world to be the Twilight vampire, I would say yes, 100%. I think that there's not that many drawbacks. There's all just positive things that happen. You live forever. You don't have to worry about getting sick, dying, getting old, all that kind of good stuff on there. There's ways you can make money. You can just kind of like chill for a minute and just go explore, travel, all that stuff. Just wear your sunscreen, which everybody should be doing now is wearing sunscreen. So I just think that if you get the opportunity, you go for it 100% is what you do. Hey guys, I just want to thank you guys for joining me again and really excited. And I will start posting on a regular basis, and be sure to hit the like, subscribe, thumbs up, all that kind of good stuff on there. Leave a comment. Maybe you decide like, hey, that's not for you. Maybe you can come up some reasons why, or maybe you think of some other really cool jobs that you can do. Is what you can think of on there. So gotta love urban fantasy and gotta love Twilight. So hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys later.